So, think of the most perfect person you know. The one who always sacrifices for everyone. They never break a single rule, and they just always seem to do the right thing.
Right. Yeah, we all have someone like that in our lives.
Yeah.
Or maybe we are that person.
Yeah, exactly. But have you ever noticed that they are also, like, often the angriest or maybe the most resentful person in the room?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like they carry this simmering hostility right beneath a very shiny surface of absolute flawless behavior. And today, we are pulling apart a deeply counterintuitive idea. It's the concept that being perfect, or at least, clinging to the illusion that you're perfect, can actually become this toxic poison inside you.
It really is one of the great paradoxes of human psychology. I mean, we spend our entire lives trying to accumulate this spotless record of good deeds, right? We're
Yeah.
desperately trying to be the righteous party in every single conflict, only to discover that this exact pursuit is the very thing making us miserable.
Yeah, it completely backfires. So to figure out why that happens, and more importantly, how to stop it, we are going on a deep dive today into a brilliant psychological framework. It actually originates from a 2016 sermon delivered at Bogapsa Temple in South Korea.
Right.
And the overarching mission here, the whole theme, is looking at the illusion of perfection and very practical methods for emptying out the poison that builds up inside us. Now, because this comes from a temple, you might assume, we're going to talk about mystical enlightenment or some kind of religious dogma.
Which is a fair assumption. Yeah.
Right. But the reality is actually far more grounded. This is a really profound look at the human ego, basically disguised as spiritual counseling.
Well, the setting is a temple, sure, but the core focus is incredibly universal. The framework uses the daily lives of monks and temple followers to illustrate how our most well-intentioned behaviors, our desires to be good and helpful and correct, how they often mask a deep, unyielding intolerance for the flaws of the world.
Wow, yeah, an intolerance for flaws.
Exactly. And the goal of our discussion today is to help you identify where this toxic perfectionism might be hiding in your own life and to outline the physical, actionable steps to drain it away.
I love that. Let's just get right into the psychology of this with a story from the source that captures this trap beautifully. It involves a woman working at the temple as a Gongyang Jew.
Right, the temple cook.
Yeah, she manages the meals and essentially devotes herself completely to serving the community. And this woman comes to the head monk for counseling because frankly, she's on the verge of a total breakdown. She lays out her entire life story.
And it's an intense story. I mean, she's really been through it.
Oh, completely. She says she has dedicated her life to being the perfect eldest daughter. She submitted to all her family's demands. She raised her younger siblings, obeyed her mother without question. Basically, she feels she has lived this morally flawless life since childhood.
She possesses, like, a spotless resume of righteousness. She's built her entire identity around her own subservience and goodness.
But she is incredibly unhappy at the temple. Because the head monk constantly scolds her, he micromanages her kitchen. If a follower doesn't show up for service, the monk yells at her. If someone is late, he yells at her again.
Which just feels so unfair to her.
Totally unfair. She feels entirely victimized by this treatment. She asks the monk, hey, I am serving everyone, I'm making all the meals, I am doing everything right. What is wrong with me that I have to endure this abuse?
And then the monk delivers a diagnosis she is entirely unprepared to hear, because he does not validate her victimhood at all.
Nope, not even a little bit.
He tells her that her desire to win, like her deep-seated desperate need to be perfectly right all the time, is the actual source of her suffering. Her lifelong history of being good hasn't brought her peace, right? It has accumulated inside her as a literal poison.
Wow.
Because she believes she's never done anything wrong, she has zero tolerance for anyone else's imperfections.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. I picture it like she has been wearing this heavy suit of armor made out of her good deeds for decades. Every time she sacrificed her own needs, or every time she bit her tongue, she added another layer of steel to this armor.
That's a great visual.
Right. And she thinks it's protecting her from the world. But in reality, it's just isolating her. It's incredibly heavy. And the immense pressure of carrying all that unacknowledged resentment is finally crushing her from the inside out. So the second someone taps on that armor, like the monk criticizing her cooking, she just completely shatters.
What's fascinating here is that the armor is actually a mechanism of the ego. The framework we're exploring introduces a brilliant metaphor here regarding how she views her own spiritual practice. Because she wears this armor of goodness, she assumes she should be immune to criticism.
Like she's untouchable.
Exactly. The monk points out that her approach is like standing in the middle of a war zone, holding a machine gun, waiting for the enemies to come to you, and then being shocked when you get shot at.
Oh, wow. So she expects her goodness to act like some magical force field or something.
Yeah, she expects her goodness to be a weapon that forces the world into submission. The monk explains that if you stand there screaming, "Hey, I am armed with my perfect morality, come at me," the bullets and bombs of life are not going to magically avoid you. You are still in a war zone.
Right. The world is still the world.
Exactly. The purpose of spiritual practice, or any deep psychological work for that matter, is not to build a shield against the external world. It's a tool to control oneself. It's a method of training your own mind so that you don't absorb the toxic things you encounter.
That makes so much sense because when you believe you're flawless, you expect the world to just cater to that perfection. And when it inevitably doesn't, that goodness just ferments into bitter judgment.
It really does.
Like this perfect, innocent temple cook actually starts creating massive chaos. She gossips, she complains to the other followers, she fights back. Her internal poison leaks out and infects her entire environment.
Which highlights a critical shift in our behavior, I think. This internal illusion of perfection doesn't just make us privately miserable. It actively drives us to want to control everyone around us. We project our rigid standards outward onto everyone else.
Yeah, that dynamic is perfectly illustrated by another anecdote from the source. It involves this wealthy corporate CEO. So this guy was a major donor to the temple and spent his time practicing a very specific koan meditation.
A koan, for anyone unfamiliar, is basically a Zen riddle. It's a paradoxical question designed to break your normal way of thinking.
Right, and the phrase he meditated on was bodhicitta. What is this? And bodhicitta basically refers to the awakened mind, or the mind of enlightenment.
Which is a very high-level, abstract practice. Meditating on the nature of the awakened mind is no small feat.
No, it's intense. But he actually experiences a massive awakening through this practice. But the funny thing is, it is not some mystical vision of glowing lights. His awakening is the sudden, crushing realization of his own terrible behavior.
Oh, I love this part.
He realizes he had been treating this sacred temple exactly like his own corporation. Every time a new monk would arrive, he'd evaluate them. He was literally judging the spiritual leaders as if they were his underperforming employees.
Well, let's look at the mechanism of why that specific koan worked for him. I mean, a highly successful CEO has built an ego based on analytical judgment, efficiency, supremacy. He believes his way is the objective best way.
Right, he's the boss.
Right. So chanting, "What is this awakened mind?" relentlessly, it forces the brain to short-circuit its usual analytical pathways. It breaks the habit of categorizing everything into good or bad, profitable or unprofitable.
Wow, so it shatters his framework.
Exactly. When that analytical judgment finally collapsed, he was left looking at the raw reality of his actions. He saw that he was just projecting his corporate arrogance onto a space of humility.
He just assumed his worldly perfection translated directly to spiritual perfection. But, the framework shares another story about control that feels much closer to home for a lot of people. It involves a mother suffering from severe vitiligo.
Right, which is an autoimmune condition that causes large patches of skin to lose their pigment.
Yeah, and her condition was incredibly severe. So she was advised by the temple to engage in a very specific, intense chanting practice to help manage it.
And it is worth contextualizing this medically, actually. Autoimmune responses like vitiligo are frequently exacerbated by extreme chronic psychological stress. When the body is in a constant state of fight or flight, the immune system can literally begin attacking the body's own cells.
That is so wild. So she commits to this chanting practice fully. And remarkably, over 10 years, her vitiligo completely clears up. But then, entirely out of nowhere, the white patches begin returning. She goes back to the temple, incredibly distressed, asking why her illness has come back when she did all the required chants.
And the spiritual leaders observe her behavior and they quickly identify the trigger. The illness returned because she had fallen right back into her worldly attachments. Specifically, she'd become entirely consumed with micromanaging the life of her grown son.
Oh, man. She was cooking all his meals, cleaning his apartment, just obsessing over his every single need. She simply could not let him live his own life.
No boundaries at all?
None. And the advice she receives from the temple is honestly jarring. They tell her that to heal, she needs to learn to part while living.
Part while living. It's a heavy phrase.
It is, and I have to push back on this concept a little bit. I think anyone listening who is a parent or even just a manager at a company can totally relate to that panic of wanting to step in and fix things for someone you care about.
Of course, it's a very natural instinct.
Right, like doing your adult child's laundry might be overbearing, but it is fundamentally a mother's love. Telling a mother she needs to part from her son while they're both still alive sounds incredibly harsh.
Yeah.
Why is this considered toxic?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to redefine what we're calling love in this context. What the mother viewed as love was actually a projection of her own severe anxiety and her ego. True love does not involve turning another human being into a reflection of your own character.
Okay, that's fair.
And it certainly doesn't mean binding them to you so tightly that neither of you can breathe. Her need to control his environment was really about soothing her own internal panic, not about his well-being.
She basically felt that if she wasn't fixing his life, she was failing as a perfect mother.
Exactly. The illusion of perfection rears its head again. Parting while living doesn't mean physical abandonment or cutting off contact. It's a psychological separation. It means letting go of your suffocating control and recognizing that your child is an autonomous entity. They have their own path, their own mistakes to make, and their own life to lead.
So her relentless hovering was a form of chronic stress, which triggered the autoimmune relapse. Her physical sickness was a direct manifestation of this toxic mental state.
Precisely.
And when she finally listened, she packed her bags and went to stay at the temple to refocus her mind. Both of them got better. The text actually points out that the son, who she was absolutely convinced could not survive without her, experienced a massive sense of mental relief.
The poison of our own ego really does weigh down the exact people we claim to be helping.
It's crazy. So if this obsessive overthinking, this desperate desire for control, and this heavy armor of righteousness is the poison, how do we actively get it out of our system? Because just knowing that I'm overthinking doesn't magically stop me from overthinking.
Oh, it wouldn't be nice if it did. But to understand the cure, we first have to understand the depth of the root cause. The framework touches on the concept of unseen karmic debts. It presents the story of a woman who came to the temple because every time she attempted to pray, she would just burst into uncontrollable sobbing. She had no idea why she was crying.
Yeah, and during her prayers, she actually started having a vivid vision of a man in his 40s with tears of blood streaming down his face. Just horrifying stuff.
Really haunting. And when she described this to the monk, a deeply buried trauma came to the surface. Decades prior, when she was very young, she had a daughter with a man she loved. But they lived in crushing, inescapable poverty. The situation was so desperate that she eventually abandoned her husband and her 5-year-old child. To survive and build a new, successful life, she completely compartmentalized that memory. She just locked it away.
She essentially built a brand new identity as this perfect, successful woman. But her body kept the score. She later discovered that her abandoned husband had actually died in his early 40s. The vision she had wasn't necessarily a literal ghost. It was the psychological weight of her repressed guilt and trauma finally breaking through that meticulously constructed armor.
Which goes to show we all carry unseen baggage. We all have mistakes we've run away from while pretending to be flawless. Her tears were the physical manifestation of that unresolved psychological debt. You just cannot heal what you refuse to look at. Acknowledging your deep flaws is the mandatory first step to untangling the poison.
But once you acknowledge that internal mess, how do you physically clear it? Because this leads to, I think, the most fascinating mechanism in the entire framework. It's the story of a wealthy young man suffering from severe schizophrenia.
Right. This is such a powerful example.
He had been heavily medicated for 26 years. His wealthy family had tried everything. I mean, every psychiatric hospital, every religious intervention from Christianity to Buddhism. He even considered becoming a priest at one point. But nothing could quiet the agonizing storm of obsessive thoughts in his mind.
His brain was trapped in this relentless cycle of detachment from reality and catastrophic overthinking.
Exactly. So he comes to the monk. And the monk does not tell him to sit on a cushion and chant. He doesn't try to psychoanalyze his childhood trauma. Instead, the monk takes him out to a valley, points to a massive, incredibly heavy stone, and says, hey, carry this stone all the way back to your house.
Which is wild. This is a young man from a privileged background who is likely never engaged in a moment of hard physical labor in his entire life.
Never. He is struggling, sweating, hauling this massive rock onto a public bus, literally dragging it through the streets. He is pushed to the absolute brink of physical exhaustion until he finally gets it inside his house and just drops it on the floor.
I can only imagine what his family thought.
Oh, his family is staring at him in horror. But when they ask how he feels, the young man says, "I am exhausted, but my agonizing thoughts have actually quieted down."
So why did a rock succeed where 26 years of medication and prayer failed? We really have to look at how the brain functions here. When you are trapped in a cycle of severe anxiety or obsessive overthinking, your brain's default mode network is in overdrive. You're entirely trapped in abstract, internal narratives.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you cannot use a poisoned mind to cure a poisoned mind.
Precisely. The extreme physical cognitive load of carrying that heavy stone demanded his absolute presence. You cannot ruminate on your ego, your trauma, or your delusions when your physical body is screaming under the weight of a boulder. The physical strain interrupted the neural loop. It anchored him violently back into physical reality.
And the monk's treatment didn't even end with the rock. Following that incident, the young man was ordered to do menial chores every single day. He had to walk to the market to buy groceries, he had to sweep the floors, and in one instance, there was a massive windstorm blowing leaves everywhere. The monk ordered the young man to stand outside and sweep the leaves off a window.
Sweeping leaves in the middle of a windstorm is an absurd, impossible task. The leaves will simply blow right back.
Right. But the absurdity is the point. He had to do it, and he had to do it without complaint. He just had to keep sweeping. And through this daily, frustrating, grounding physical labor, the young man was eventually cured.
Wow.
He came off his medication entirely and began functioning normally. The physical work literally forced the poison of overthinking out of his system through his sweat.
It redefines our entire concept of spirituality and healing, really. We so often picture spiritual practice as sitting perfectly serene in a quiet, beautiful room. But this framework suggests that a monk chopping wood or carrying water in a state of absolute flow is actually practicing the highest form of mental discipline.
There is a beautiful synthesis in the text that summarizes this. It says, "If you do any work joyfully and with gratitude, that in itself is prayer."
That's wonderful. The poison of the ego is not emptied by thinking harder about how pure you are or by intellectually analyzing your flaws. It is emptied by humbly accepting the physical reality right in front of you, whatever that reality may be, and engaging with it through joyful action.
It makes you realize how much energy we just waste trying to construct this perfect identity for ourselves. We build this flawless house, and then we stand on the front porch angrily yelling at everyone else for having messy yards.
That imagery perfectly aligns with the profound metaphor introduced at the very end of this framework. It is the concept of the open door. The speaker notes, "If I open my own door, I don't suspect what's inside. It's wrong to keep my door closed and demand that others open theirs."
That is such an incredibly vivid way to frame human interaction.
Isn't it? If you keep the door to your own mind firmly shut, if you refuse to look at your own unseen karmic debts, your own repressed guilt, your own desperate need for control, you will spend your entire life being deeply suspicious of everyone around you.
You'll just assume everyone else is the source of the problem.
Exactly. You demand they open their doors and fix their messes while you hide behind a closed door of perfectly curated righteousness. You must look at your own inner mess before judging the world.
Because if you don't open that door, the hidden mess just ferments. It turns into the very poison that ruins your life, just like that temple cook who couldn't understand why her lifelong goodness made her so intensely angry.
True peace is never achieved by becoming flawless. It's achieved by dropping the exhausting, isolating performance of flawlessness altogether.
Yeah, the journey we have taken today through these psychological profiles shows us that striving to be the perfect daughter, the perfect CEO, or the perfect mother, it often just builds a toxic reservoir of judgment. True peace comes from letting go of the need to control the people around us. It comes from parting while living, allowing the people we love to exist without our constant micromanagement. And it comes from finding a sense of grounding, moving meditation in our daily humble actions. Joyful action is the ultimate antidote to the ego.
When you finally stop trying to be perfectly right, you create the space to just be happy.
I think that is a realization we can all apply to our daily lives. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a lingering question to ponder long after you finish listening. Think about the one trait you pride yourself on the most, your greatest virtue. The thing you do better or more righteously than anyone else in your family or your workplace. Got it.
Oh, this is a tough one.
Now ask yourself, is it possible that your absolute certainty about how good you are in that specific area is actually the very poison keeping you from true peace?
Something to really sit with.
Thanks for joining the deep dive. We'll catch you next time.